Hello and welcome back to another GiantSlayerTV Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for rank play in patch 11.11. With the recently dropped B patch, the meta is still being figured out, so take today's top 10 with a grain of salt. Most of the champions on it are doing well, but there may be shifts in the meta that cause new ones to rise up to the top and others to fall down. That said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 10, we have Teemo coming in at number 10. Generally, the 10th spot on the list isn't given to a 5-cost champion and leads more towards lower cost units. But after the B patch with the nerfs to both Lulu and Kennen, playing early Hellions and transitioning into Teemo may not be as straightforward as it was in the previous patch. Because of that, it makes Teemo less appealing to play, as the best way to use Teemo is when you have a good enough economy to hit level 8 early with high health. Without high health, you're going to dip fairly low by committing to Teemo, since he costs health to purchase. Of course, there are plenty of other openings with stage 2 and 3 boards that can win streak and save health, but Hellions were by far the best for Teemo. That all said, if you can secure Teemo 2 during level 8 with good items, he's a top tier carry that counters a lot of other carries because his ability applies an attack speed slow. Teemo's AoE is also quite good against assassins, as they tend to clump up, plus again, the attack speed slow does severely reduce the value of Nocturne. So even if it's a bit harder to transition towards Teemo, once you have him, he's still plenty strong. All in all, we may end up seeing Hellions continue to be a strong meta opening, in which case Teemo could easily be higher on the list. For now, given the B patch nerfs, we'll keep Teemo in our 10th spot. Let's move on to the next champion, coming in at number 9, Aphelios. Aphelios hasn't had the best time so far in Set 5, as the nerfs he received a few patches ago left him in an almost unplayable state. But a few small buffs and a whole bunch of nerfs to other champions and traits have left him in a playable spot. Aphelios is certainly not the most reliable of carries, but as far as potential 4-cost carries go, he's at least an option in the right circumstance. To be in that situation, you need good items and a composition built around him. Generally, you want high attack damage for Aphelios, so Deathblade is valuable, as is Infinity Edge. While attack speed is essential, you can skip Rageblade if you have either 4 Ranger or Lulu to buff his attack speed. That said, it's common to use a Rageblade just to ensure he ramps up during a fight. Lastly, you can add a utility with Runins or Bloodthirster, or just pack on more damage if you need it. But keep in mind, you have to have these types of items, and in some cases, even more specific items like Last Whisper. Without full items of worthwhile value, Aphelios is not going to do enough. As for what to play along with him, Nightbringer is a necessity. Not only is the shield helpful in keeping Aphelios alive, especially in a meta heavily influenced by assassins, but the damage also assists him in cleaning up fights. Either 4 Nightbringer or 6 is fine, as well as 2 or 4 Rangers. Just be sure to have both traits active for him, along with 3 full items, Darius for Armor Shred, and have him 2-starred. Get all of that, and Aphelios will be strong, and without it, you may want to consider pivoting. Up next, we have Riven coming in as the number 8 champion. Riven has been buffed so many times that it's finally her time to shine as a carry. Except that she doesn't always shine, since you may not always be able to 3-star her. In order for Riven to truly carry, she has to be a tier 3. On the plus side for Riven, if you want to just use her as an early carry through stage 2, 3, and parts of 4, she's perfect. It's only in the late game that you must fully commit to 3-starring her, otherwise pivoting into a different carry is the best option. As for her early game, Riven does well both because of Dawnbringer and being a viable item holder. Slap items like Bloodthirster and Runins on her and she'll do a good amount of damage while being very hard to kill. And those items transfer easily to either Draven or Aphelios, so you have at least potential pivots later on in the game. Overall, in a meta favoring rerolling, Riven is doing quite well. Moving along, we've got Ryze coming in at number 7. Oh yes, Ryze is back again in our top 10 because the champ is ridiculously good against assassins. With any mana item, he'll cast quickly, which means he's going to stun an assassin if it's your backline, and on the second cast, any nearby enemy units will be stunned as well. This buys your backline so much time to deal with assassins, which is key to surviving against them in the late game. Lulu was a contender for the Mystic spot, but due to the B patch, the jury is still out on how effective she is. Of course, if you use both her and Ryze, you have the best chance at dealing with assassins. So keep that in mind if you're running a squishy backline, that playing both champions together is a viable solution. Besides doing well against assassins, Ryze just fits well into most mid and late game boards due to his CC and being a mystic. Abomination is also a popular trait right now, and Ryze helps enable through stage 3 and 4. Later on, he can also provide value to champions like Hecarim and Draven with Forgotten. Put all of that together and you have a super solid champion in the current meta. Next, we have Darius coming in at number 6. Darius finally received some much needed buffs in the 11.11 patch. Due to those buffs, and despite losing value from his armor shred, Darius has become a viable late game frontliner. For the most part, he's only going to be used for physical damage compositions, but luckily that's the bulk of the meta, with Draven, Aphelios, and Riven all being viable carries. The downside to Darius is that he needs to be tier 2 if you want him to actually be useful as a frontliner. Sure, with items he can do alright at level 1, but it's not until you 2-star him that he truly shines. This means he's nowhere near the most reliable of frontliners, but given his value with auto attack carries, he at least has a place in the meta. Coming in at number 5 is Nocturne. We debated whether Nocturne should be higher on the list because of the 3 meta assassins, he's the most common carry. And his late game is best between himself, Katarina, and LeBlanc. The reason we're keeping him at only number 5 is that assassins, while strong, can still be outpositioned once top 4 is reached. And you must 3-star Nocturne if you ever want to have a chance at winning with assassins. Basically, the cap on playing assassin is much lower than a lot of other comps. Even though they're quite strong, you're almost always put in a position where you have to hope the enemy players aren't specifically positioning for you. That's why they become so weak in the top 4, as knowing who you're going against is much more concrete. With all that said, Nocturne with double Runins and Infinity Edge is a beast that will absolutely carry you through stage 4 and 5. Just keep in mind that you need to be careful with your positioning and scout often if you want to secure more than a 4th or 3rd place finish. Up next, we have a double feature as both Ivern and Volibear are tied for the number 4 spot. Usually we avoid having 2 champions in the same spot, but for Ivern and Volibear, it just makes too much sense not to do it. You're rarely ever going to see one without the other because Revenant increases the value of both champions by a large margin. Yes, they did nerf Revenant heavily, so it's nowhere near as effective as it once was, but being able to revive and likely ensure at least one cast of their ability makes Ivern, Volibear, and Revenant a potent frontline combination. Besides being valuable in the frontline, having both champions provide Revenant for Nocturne is important in the meta as well. All you have to do is take a quick glance at a lot of top players' match histories, and you'll see both Ivern and Volibear being played in a lot of their games due to the frontline they provide. Moving on into our top 3, we have Draven coming in at number 3. Even though the meta has favored rerolling, Draven has remained a reliable late game carry. This is due to being able to pivot into Draven since he doesn't require much to do well. Sure, you want good items on him, but there's a lot of early game openings and items you will often make that transfer easily to Draven. More importantly is you don't need to play around a specific composition for Draven to do well. Legionnaire is obviously the most common, but even then there's plenty of nuance. As long as you have a solid frontline, which can basically be Mordekaiser with items, Draven can sit back and dish out damage whether he has 2 or more Legionnaire. From there, you can add in utility champions like Ryze, which also opens the door to Forgotten, or more frontline with units like Rel and Darius. Basically, you're free to play a lot of strong champions with Draven. That flexibility helps a lot in the meta. The main concern is going to be Assassin, since Vel'Koz is no longer a common threat, but Draven can be easily maneuvered and positioned in a way to effectively deal with Assassins, so he's not as vulnerable as something like Aphelios. Coming in at number 2 is Nunu. Even though Set was heavily nerfed, meaning Draconic has taken a nosedive out of the meta, Nunu is still one of the best 3 costs in the game. There's a few reasons, one of which are his traits. Both Brawler and Abomination spike heavily during stages 2 and 3, with Nunu being the linchpin for both synergies. Hitting an early Nunu on the PvE orb or off the carousel, or even just high rolling him in your shop is essentially a guaranteed win streak. With Brawler, he's difficult to kill, uses defensive items very well, and his ability does a high amount of damage. Put all that together and you have one of the best, if not the best, early 3-cost champions in the current meta. And the number 1 champion for patch 11.11 is Rel. Frontline is important for any composition, and Rel is by far the best frontliner. Sure, Cavalier was nerfed a bit and Hecarim 3 is much harder to kill than Rel, but universally speaking, Rel will fit into any composition. Between how well she survives, the shield she provides to your champions, and also having CC, it's no surprise she's a top tier frontliner. And she's an Ironclad champion, meaning you open the door to splashing in other Ironclad champions if you need to. Honestly, there's not much else to say in regards to Rel. If you need a solid frontliner, look no further. That's it for our top 10 champions for patch 11.11. But before we go, we do have a few honorable mentions to talk about. First off, we have to talk about Brand and Hecarim. These two champions are part of the reroll composition, Cavalier Spellweavers, and they both do very well as 3-star units. The main reason we kept them off the top 10 is consistency. Yes, you can do well if you hit both Brand 3 and Hecarim 3, but it's not a guaranteed thing, especially after Varus was nerfed. Due to that nerf, we're seeing level 6 rerolling less often, and instead level 7 is the level to roll. This means there's less 2-cost units being pulled out of the pool, so hitting both Brand 3 and Hecarim 3 is less efficient. Still, they are strong champions, but be wary of forcing them every game after the B patch. Another honorable mention we want to quickly talk about is Lulu. She was nerfed in the B patch, but don't let that prevent you from playing her. She's likely still fine as a 2-star champion, especially against assassins or buffing champions like Aphelios. Lastly, there's LeBlanc. Katarina is a viable carry, but the assassin meta definitely favors Nocturne and LeBlanc more. LeBlanc just ends up being a CC backbone that helps Nocturne pop off in fights. But after so many nerfs, she's not the strongest at carries anymore, which is why we have her in the honorable mentions instead of in the top 10. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. As we said in the introduction, it's likely the meta will continue to evolve as players get used to the changes from the B patch. Let us know in the comment section below what champions you think deserve to be in our top 10. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.